Hello and welcome to another episode of the Christian Reeve podcast. Today's guest is an actor and a huge wrestling fan, so you already know that I'm going to absolutely love this show. His name is Jarod Shorrock. Welcome to the show. How you doing, man?
I'm doing all right, mate. How are you, man?
I'm doing well, man. I'm a little bit tired, but I know that this is going to immediately wake me up. Especially after 3 coffees as well. When we get into it, we start arguing and stuff. No, I'm just kidding. So this is an interesting one because on my podcast, I've been doing this about 3 years now. There's only been a few people I've had on the show that I've actually met in real person, either people I've known from a young age or people I met later on through online. So for those who don't know, me and Jarod actually worked on a film together recently. So before we get into your acting journey and stuff like that, how did you actually find that specific role? And what was your experience? I'd like to kind of go back and forth on perspectives of that.
Yeah, of course. It was really interesting. Obviously, my dad was also working on it, and he actually brought up that apparently he needed someone to be tied up in a chair and pretended to be shot. And so he asked my brother if he wanted to do it. He's the one that does all the camera work and stuff like that. He's the one into films. And he said, yeah, and he hasn't given me a response yet. And I said, oh, I'll do it if you want. Like, I don't mind. I've got spare time. Chair apparently was too small for me to fit in. I'm 6'4", so it's going to be a bit difficult to find a chair that I'll fit in and then be able to fall on safely. But essentially, because I was 6'4", I think Andy and my dad kind of came up with this decision to have me be a bodyguard of sorts. So they kind of, I don't know if they created a whole new character for me or if they kind of just brought me in to do that. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. Obviously, I didn't have any speaking role. It would just kind of be off to the side, sometimes not even on camera, but I've just got to still act and kind of be in the right place for people's heads to look towards and stuff like that. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed the 2 days that I was there. Really cool.
And what would you say was your kind of maybe takeaway from that experience?
Takeaway from that experience, I think I learned a lot about what it actually means to act in something. Acting for me has never really been on my radar. I'm very much into my wrestling, very much into my video games. I'm currently trying to become a games designer at the moment.
Interesting.
I just this opportunity came up, and I thought, this would be a really cool, fun thing to do. But yeah, I feel like I learned so much about just how stuff works. My dad would tell me yeah, you're going to do a bunch of takes, it's going to be like this. So I was like, yeah, that's fine, I could do that, no problem. But then ultimately, as they film it, they do the first take, and then it's a complete rerun. Do the second take, do the third take, do the fourth take. I'm just thinking, man, you've got to do this on repeat all day. This is nuts. But yeah, it's really cool to see kind of a behind the scenes look of how everything works. Was super interesting.
I have to say, my personal experience, there's three takeaways I had. 4 actually. One, interesting location. So a bit of behind the scenes. Yeah. So for those who don't know, we were recording in essentially a storage lockup. They sort of fashioned into an office. One of the people on set happened to own it. And I believe he's a musician as well as an actor.
My dad's the one that owns.
That's your dad. Okay, cool. Yeah, cool guy. And just interesting. I suppose the use of space. Whatever space you're in, you can always kind of manipulate it. And for what it's worth, I mean, everything's filmed pretty much in one space, which is really cool.
Yeah.
And so that was cool. I thought obviously everyone on set was really professional. I'm about 5 years into acting right now, and it ranges as far as the opportunities I get. Right now it's split largely between voice acting roles and extra stuff. So when I get something like this, where it's a short film, chance to be on screen, it's ticks all the boxes and it's really exciting. And some of the people I work with on this particular production, I'd worked with previously. So the cinematographer / director Giuseppe Abba is who's amazing. I worked on with him and also Dan McGee on a film earlier this year, and I'd actually met Dan through Extras work, and he mentioned that he was a filmmaker, and I was like, oh, cool. And I will say, just on a side note, like with Extras work, and I covered this in the previous episode, it has a lot of opportunities potentially, and it really depends on your perspective of what you get out of it and so on. And for me, one of the biggest things last year was meeting Dan, and obviously we finally worked together on something this year. But I'd never acted alongside him other than the extra stuff, which is largely just, I don't know if you've ever done extra stuff. It's just mucking around. Do you know what I mean? You're not, I mean, sometimes you have to be a bit more serious, but a lot of the time you're just in the background, afterthought, whatever. And we just had fun with it, and we cracked jokes and whatnot. But now we were working together. But this was the first opportunity to actually see him act. And he was, I believe, like the main character in this particular
pretty
film.
much, yeah.
And cracking actor. Like really, really good actor.
Which is, I had moments where I'd be stood, like, it'd just be him acting on his own, and I'd be stood right at the very back, and I was scared to look at him. Just on the off chance I might put him off or something. Like, I'm just stood there staring at him in awe of what he's doing. Like, it was really cool to just watch him do his thing.
Something that was really cool about this particular film, which I don't normally pay attention to things like this, but I do when it's with acting. So Dan is a little bit smaller than me. I'm a bit taller than him. And obviously he's playing a boss, right? And his height doesn't really matter in the context of this scene, but it does in the sense that once I learned, like, okay, this is what my character is. He's a guy that like owes some money. He's nervous, right? I understood then, like, okay, shrunk soldiers, kind of like try to lessen yourself as much as possible, like reduce yourself down, but you still can't change the size differential. It's there.
Yeah, of course.
But it doesn't really matter. I mean, if you think, for example, Al Pacino in The Godfather, I mean, he's a short man, but like you always feel that he's powerful and he demands respect.
It's that presence about him, isn't it? It's the
Dan nailed it. He just had that presence. He had that kind of angry, kind of sadistic nature in that, and it was there, and it really came through, and it was such a pleasure to work alongside him and act alongside him. I actually turned to him at one point and I just said, like you're really fucking good, man. Like, just really good. And like I could tell it meant a lot to him. I don't know, like, because I think he's sort of focused more, I think, on like writing and directing and stuff, and he's been doing this a lot longer than I have. But yeah, he's really good. He's
very good.
Yeah,
insanely good. It was great because the way my character worked, like I said, I had no lines. I just had to sit off to the side and just kind of essentially be an extra on the set. And so I just literally got to watch all of you just act out. You were incredible too, with you.
Thanks,
like you were saying, when you had a whole shrinking down, nervous energy and stuff like that. Like you were really cool to just kind of. I almost got like a first front row seat into just watching everybody do a perfect job on the show. It was really cool, really interesting.
The size differential thing. I know I'm just giving away a lot right now, but guys, the film's called Choc Chips. It'll be out probably, I reckon, maybe later this year, maybe early next year. Yeah. Certainly, I will be plugging it everywhere though, so look out for that. Choc Chips. But yeah, there was a scene later on where there's another guy. His name escapes me right now, but he's a fantastic actor, and he's really menacing. And it was just a very simple scene. Originally, the actual direction for the scene was very different. Originally, it had this guy bursting through, and then like the door would like smack me in the face, and I'd be on the floor like cowering or something. And I said this to Andy, who was running the whole thing, and he was like, "Oh no, we've changed it up. So like now you're just passing each other." And I was like, "Okay." And I was thinking, I can't remember if I might have pitched some ideas. I like that. I like a collaborative process.
Yeah. And
100%. Like, you got like an idea, like, well, what if we try it this way? What about this? What do you think? And it was funny because I know that his name escapes me. Damien, I think his name is.
I think so. Yeah.
Damien, right? So Damien like knew exactly. Like I barely even had to say anything. He was just on the same wavelength as me. It was like, right, yeah, just you know what I mean? Like he'll be menacing, he'll stand his ground. I just cower around him. But because there's the size differential thing, I have to be even more awkward and be like, like that. But it worked perfectly. It was brilliant. Plus, there's I guess we'll see on the final product how they do this, but because we've got a lot of different angles. But I hope that what we see is me cower, step back, and then boom, and there's the reveal.
It's the reveal,
yeah. Because he's cracking, man. He really is. But you know what's funny? Like that specific scene, which sounds so easy, it's just two guys passing each other through a door. Yeah, took ages.
Just so long.
Oh my god! And it's always the little things as well. Everything else was really quick, but that, like, how many takes did we do?
Like, no, I don't even know anymore. I don't even know. Upwards of maybe 8, 9 times. Maybe.
And I just everybody's like, "Well, what if we tried the camera here?" And it was just like it just wasn't working. And then we got there in the end, but it was just like compared to the scenes earlier where we did like maybe 2, 3 takes per thing.
Yeah.
That was just a nightmare. And there's
actual lines in the other takes that we're doing too on the other scenes, but with this one, it's just it's just 2 people passing by scared and then walk away. It took so much longer than anything else we ever did.
That's bloody typical, isn't it? Let's move on. I want to kind of just get a good idea of you in acting. So, like, how did you get into acting? How long have you been doing this?
Well, like I said before, this is actually my first acting role.
Oh, mad!
If you will, this is my introduction into the world.
Wow!
Like I said, it's never been on my radar as such. I've always been into my films and into movies and stuff like that. But yeah, it was my dad that was just asking if they needed anyone, or if I would be willing to do this film that he's making, and I said, yeah, sure, absolutely. I've got the time to. I've got nothing else planned at the moment, so why not? Like I said, yeah, it's my introduction into the world.
Do you think you'll keep doing it, or
potentially? It was a lot of fun. I'd love to definitely work on some other stuff if I'm available to do it. It's not something I'm actively pursuing, but it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun.
Well, speaking of things that you're actively pursuing, you mentioned before it was a games designer or graphic designer?
Games
designer. Let's talk about that, man. Where did that dream start?
I mean, I've always been interested in video games. Ever since I was younger, it's always been... every time I come home from primary school, it's always immediately on the PlayStation, playing whatever games I had at that time, Xbox 360. I've had all the consoles. I've got my own PC. You know what I mean? It's always been... video games in my life, and it wasn't until maybe my last year of high school when I was deciding, or secondary school, if you will, when I was deciding what I wanted to do in my future. Obviously, college is on the way, and a friend of mine said that he's going to be doing games design. He's going to be creating video games at college, and I went, "Oh, I didn't even know that was an option to do at college. I thought it was just, something that you've got to do on the side." And no, there's courses. There was a course at Blackburn that I went to. I went to Blackburn College, did that for 2 years, more focused on the art and design of video games, and then started university in 2018 doing actual games design. So I've created a bunch of different games during that time. Obviously with COVID and stuff like that, that really derailed a lot of the stuff.
Lucky though that it wasn't, because I feel bad for the people like their first year was 2020, because obviously your first year would have been was it 2018 to 2019?
Yes, and then 2019 so it was halfway through my second year that that COVID hit.
But that's okay. I don't want to say it's good because it isn't, but in a way, like at least you got your first year, you got your partying, you got a bit of this experience in the second year, and then obviously once it starts getting a bit more serious, like degree wise. Well, yeah, I mean, you'd already be studying indoors anyway.
Yeah, that's it. I'd already learned all the stuff that I needed to learn. It was then just putting it into practice with.
Right, yeah.
The only issue was suddenly it became a thing of, well, all the work experience that I'm meant to be doing over the summer in 2020 and 2021 and stuff like that to then prepare me for the industry. It just didn't exist then. COVID obviously happened, so it just never happened.
So this is interesting. Okay, so you want to be a games designer. I know a little bit about this. I know someone who used to. I know someone who's a games designer, and he does like indie stuff.
Yeah.
And Shout out to Aaron Wise. Hope you're doing well, buddy. So I think this is an interesting conversation because I think back in the day, the idea of a games designer was like the coolest thing ever.
Mm-hmm.
And it still is, but you see there's always a lot of controversy when it comes to like the big productions, like people not getting treated very well or people being overworked, stuff like that. I want to kind of get your kind of thoughts on that. So there's a couple of questions I want to ask with here. Firstly, have you thought about this? Like, what are your thoughts on that and approaching that? And secondly, given that in mind, what is your aim? Are you going to go down the indie route? Which, I mean, there's a massive, there's potential, there's opportunities there, it's growing. Or are you more focused on like the big bucks, working on the big productions?
Well, that's it. Ever since I was younger, it's always been, Call of Duty, GTA, all that stuff, FIFA. It's always been about the big companies. But like I said, with the way that employees have been treated and stuff like that over the years, and within the games industry, it's a weird, because you can't. On one hand, you can't say no to a job like that, like working at a big company like that. You know what I mean? There's definitely, it has its flaws. But then on the other hand, it's like I at this moment in time, I just need my first step in the door. Yeah. So obviously my initial thought process is, well, of course, indies is the immediate thing that I need to jump into. I need to get my foot in the door somehow. But yeah, at this moment in time, it's always been a dream to work at a big company. But again, like you said, with the way that people have been treated, it's looking less and less like the dream. But obviously with how big indie games are and indie development teams are, it's and
I don't want to paint it with a negative brush, because I think that like one of the things that blew my mind when I saw my friend Aaron's work was just how far indie gaming has come, and like what's possible to do with it and everything. Like it rivals modern gaming. Like I think the problem right now is there's a lot of oversaturation. It's not to say there's not good video games out there, because of course there are, but there's just so much now, much choice and abundance of everything. And I mean that is a sentence, sounds silly, doesn't it? It's like, oh, it's too much choice. just like wrestling, we'll get into that. But and sometimes that can be a bad thing, and it depends on your perspective. I look at it as the main focus is people getting treated properly, people getting paid properly. But it does seem like the shift is more towards games designers going into indie stuff, because it's like, well, you hear these stories, like I mentioned before, of like people getting treated badly on big productions. And it's like, well, why would you want to do that? Like I liken it a lot to musicians going down the independent songwriters route as opposed to going for a big contract. Now, with what you said before, if you get offered something big, you'd probably take it.
Yeah,
but here's the thing: at the same time, I imagine games designers don't have to really worry about the idea of like signing away things in perpetuity and like people owning your shit for the rest of the time. It's like from what I understand, it's much the same as acting. It's like project by project. You work on this thing right for 6 months, a year. You're done. You move on, and then that's a credit. I don't know. I mean, I think that from an enjoyment standpoint, it seems like there's a lot more you could do with indie games. There's a lot less pressure, maybe. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's an industry that I know very little about, and I suppose it's exciting to be going into it. I mean, is there anything you're working on now? Like, so you finished university, you're actively looking for opportunities. You have worked on some stuff before. Where are we at now?
Well, at the moment, I'm going back to university. Actually, I'm going to do my master's degree.
Okay.
During that course, I get to work in some VR tech and kind of create games around that, and then also actually release a game that I'll have an actual credit for, so that I can go straight onto the CV, onto the games design CV. But like I said, it's just trying to get my foot in the door. It's just trying to get that opportunity to say, hey, I am good at what I do. I know what I'm doing. I know what I'm capable of. I just need that opportunity and that chance, and I'll take it with both hands.
Man, do I relate to that right now? I feel you like deeply. It's exactly what I'm looking for. Yeah. It really is like that. It's like, I could do so much. I could give you so much. Just give me a chance, please.
Just need that one person to look at you and go, yeah, do you know what?
That's it. all it is.
That's all
One
it is.
chance, one opportunity. Gosh. Oh my God. Well, I wish you the best of luck with that. I'm sure you'll
Thank you,
smash
man.
it.
Thank you.
You ever need a voice actor? Give me a shout. I'll do it.
No, I got you, man. I got
There
you.
you go. There you go. Let's look at this. What is your take on modern wrestling?
I think it's the best wrestling ever, and that might be a controversial take.
Interesting.
I think wrestling is at its best that it's ever been. I said to a friend the other week, no matter what the viewership says, no matter what, I think more people are interested in wrestling or watching wrestling at this moment in time in comparison to any other. You could throw in the Attitude Era and say that there was 8 million people watching this episode of Raw, but I think that there are more people watching and indulging in wrestling than there ever has been in the world. I think wrestling nowadays is, again, like I said, the best it's ever been. I think there's definitely storylines that you could take from other things, matches from the past that you could take that are better than matches these days. But I think as an overall opinion. Oh, I'm back.
Lost you there.
Oh no! What did I pause on?
I don't know, but now I have to edit. Fuck's sake.
Oh no, I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry.
God damn it.
God damn it. Yeah, I think wrestling pretty much is the best it's ever been. I think it's more exciting than it ever has been in the history of the sport. At least in my humble opinion.
What is that based on, though? Is that based on the in-ring product? Is that based on...
In-ring... Absolutely. In-ring 100%. Story, like I said, storyline-wise, you could definitely take stuff from the past and go, well, this is way better than the shit that's going on now. I think I've always been more into the in-ring work than the storytelling aspect of professional wrestling. I think that's why I like AEW more than I like WWE. Because go on.
Well, all I was going to add to that was, okay, you're more focused on the in-ring product. So you're more kind of into the flippy-dippy shit.
Yeah.
You like that? Flippy-dippy?
Yeah. Flippy-dippy.
Yeah, at the end of the day, the sport has progressed a lot physically over the last 20 years. That much cannot be denied. It's changed. However, one thing that I take issue with the modern wrestling is how moves don't have the same meaning as they once did. So, for example, the super kick used to be a finishing move. Now it's just a move that people use endlessly in a match. What do you sort of think when it comes to that? Because AEW is really guilty for this.
100%.
And does that not suck you out of it a little bit?
I always immediately go to Jake the Snake Roberts' finisher. The DDT.
Yeah.
Jake the Snake Roberts does a DDT. It is impactful. It is his DDT. It's his finisher.
Yeah.
Shawn Michaels does the sweet chin music. That's his finisher. When he hits the sweet chin music, it is over. It's done.
Yeah.
Anybody else hits the sweet chin music, Shawn Michaels will kick out of it no matter what. It doesn't matter. It's just a super kick. It's the same thing with a tombstone pile driver. It's the same thing with a set out pile driver, whatever move, chalk slam. If I do a chalk slam, or if Hurricane does a chalk slam, that's not going to be as impactful as Undertaker, Kane, or Big Show, or anybody hitting a chalk slam. At least in my opinion, I think we have to progress with the time. And I understand the super kick analogy of people always hitting it. There's always the fucking, what's it called, the Canadian Destroyer that people always fucking hit. But I think for me, I must be able to switch off my brain that much that it just doesn't affect me. Like I go, if Shawn Michaels hit that, the match would be done. But because it's only Kevin Owens, because it's the Young Bucks, because it's the Usos, because it's whoever's hitting the super kick, for me personally, I'm not that bothered.
I don't know, it just always sucks me out of it. I like the way you've kind of outlined that, like it's only impactful from certain wrestlers, but I don't know, like when I look at like the Bucks and I see them hit like 1,000 super kicks and like endless just dives through the ropes and stuff, like it feels like nothing means anything at all. It feels like you just know that the guys are going to get up. And look, I'm not just piling on the Bucks. There's a lot of guys that do it, both in
Yeah, of course,
AEW,
exactly.
WWE, on the Indies. Like it always bugs me because I feel like when I watch a match, say that has like Punk in it or Reigns in it or something like that, things feel more impactful than meaningful. They feel like there's more of a story being told in the ring. You know, I don't know.
I
Just
I I I see your viewpoint. I completely agree with what you're saying. Like I said, I've always been super interested in ring stuff and the capabilities of what people could. Lucha wrestling is something that
Lucha
I
Libre.
loved to watch. Rey Mysterio as a kid was one of my favorites. It's always been ingrained in me that the acrobatics and the ability to do all these super cool moves has always just been why I enjoyed wrestling. And then the storylines is just the icing on top, the cherry on top, if you will.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Well, this next question is funny given your previous answer. So, but I'll still ask anyway. What is your favorite wrestling era?
Oh, do you know what? This is going to be even more controversial because I
Oh,
might have just said that wrestling is at its best now, but for me, the ruthless aggression era is
hey,
probably my favorite
I
wrestling era
agree.
of all
You
time.
know,
It's so good. There's just no. I don't know if it's like because that's my childhood, like that's why
yeah.
I love it so much. But I just get John Cena, Randy Orton, Brock Lesnar, Eddie Guerrero, Rob Van Dam. Like the list just it's
I totally agree with you. Like everyone goes on about the Attitude Era, and like, yeah, I get it. It was exciting, the Monday Night Wars and all that. It was outrageous. I totally get it. But as a wrestling fan,
yeah.
for like the most compelling, big scale, big feeling matches, I feel like the Ruthless Aggression had more of that. And don't forget this as well. Attitude Era ended in like '01,
Yeah,
kind of.
it
So
was like 95 to all one something like that.
yeah,
Like it
so
was not a
that's the thing. Like Ruthless Aggression includes those initial years, '01, '02, '03, '04,
yeah
and there were still, some of the biggest matches of all time happened in that time. Because of Ruthless Aggression's what, like officially '02 to '08, something like that.
yeah something like that.
Um, but it was like some huge stuff happened, and it
Mhm.
progressed though throughout that time, and it got only got better and better and better. And it's like I feel like it is the better era,
It
really.
is it
I don't
is.
know,
And
but my
like I said, professional wrestling at this time for me is better. But like I say, it's that you can. I don't think you can beat the roof. It's such a weird, complicated
mm,
opinion to have. I love the ruthless aggression era, especially the production value on the WWE shows too. While the wear on SmackDown
yeah,
felt completely different, and then obviously you've got the 2002 draft that happened, Flair and Vince McMahon on either show, that whole feud and stuff like that. It's
I must say, I do think right now is the best time to be a fan, regardless of whatever the product is right now. We have streaming services. You can go back and watch old wrestling. You can
yeah,
watch new wrestling. Look at how many options we have: WWE,
yeah,
AEW, New Japan, um, Impact. You've got a million different indies, and like to suit your different needs in America, England, and
yeah.
Japan, etc., Mexico. There's just so many options. It is the best time to be a fan, but it's also I feel like a lot of where this tribalism shit comes from is the fact that, like, in a way, you kind of do have to choose because there's just too
Yeah,
much. Like, if you choose to be, I know how this sounds, but like, if you choose to watch several brands, like several companies, your chances are you're picking to watch specific shows. So,
yeah.
like, when I do tune in, I'll typically watch like AW Dynamite. I'll skip everything else because Rampage is just pointless.
I've got off Rampage over these last few, like especially when Collision came out. I was just like, there's literally no
But
point in me.
even with Collision, man, I mean, it felt big because Punk was on it for a while, but like now that's died a death, and now it's like it doesn't really have an identity. I guess we'll see what happens in the future,
Yeah,
but they don't really need that many shows.
no,
But then, hey, listen, WWE, like Raw being 3 hours is just too much.
Yeah, way too much.
2 hours, I think, is perfectly acceptable. Hour and a half for a wrestling show. SmackDown is a lot easier to digest. You've also got NXT, which is completely different vibe. It used to be like, the cruiserweight division as well, 205 Live and all that. That's just 2 companies. 3 shows, 2 companies. 6 shows a week if you wanted to keep up with everything, pretty much. And that's not including all the... do they still do the YouTube stuff, AEW?
No, they stopped doing that when they brought out Collision.
Interesting.
They were supposed to move all of that stuff over to that's what Rampage was supposed to become. Was supposed to become the AEW Dark of actual TV, but it's just not.
So how did they end the developmental stuff then? Did you ever see like the ending of that, like what it looked like?
No, I'd pretty much clocked out of AEW Dark stuff by that point. I think usually it was just kind of like squash matches and stuff like that.
That's why I didn't watch anymore.
Throw down Wardlow against some random guy that you've never seen before, and it's
to me, and this is why I think storylines are important. I always thought AEW Dark and Elevation, were pointless because for the most part, because there were storylines, there were a few that I even watched actually that were pretty cool to unfold. But for the most part, as you say, it was squash matches. Yeah. And I can't get into wrestling that doesn't have a basic storyline.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not just talking about ongoing. I'm also talking about in the ring as well.
In the ring, exactly.
Because you can absolutely have one-off matches. You can have a show where it's just, random couplings. But there will always be a tangible story told either in the ring or just prior to. It's not that difficult to tell a story. I think Eric Bischoff one time said that there's like 5 rough cut like stories you can tell in wrestling. Obviously, there's a ton of variations on the theme, but there's like 5 main themes. I don't remember what they are. You can Google it, find it somewhere. But that was kind of the crux of what he meant. And it's true. A lot of it does come down to like good guy, bad guy in a lot of instances. Or, you
have title, I want title.
Yeah, or like humiliation, or like there's got to be some stakes. If there's no stakes, I feel like there's no interest to watch it. Like when I just see these matches, AEW does this a lot where they're like, oh, it's a dream match. And it's like, okay, yeah, it's cool to see these 2 people together wrestling, but there still has to be a stake. You still have to make me care as to why these 2 guys are wrestling. Like when Jericho had the match with Ospreay in London, this is really interesting because, and this is this weird thing about wrestling where you can be like a good guy in one country and a bad guy in another. I think this kind of started with like Bret Hart, when in America he was the bad guy, and then when he go to Canada he was a good guy, and he just went with it. And it worked weirdly. And I feel like the same happened here. Like in going into this feud, as I understand, Jericho was the face and Ospreay was the heel. The basis of that was Jericho's the AEW guy. Ospreay is like the foreigner / he's New Japan. He was
brought in by Don Callis to take out Chris Jericho.
Right. And Don Callis is the bad guy.
Yeah.
Right? But then AEW All In, they switch roles.
Yeah.
Jericho's a bad guy.
It was great.
Ospreay's a heel. You'd never, and like Don Callis was there, and I heard people say this after the fact, like it was weird having him there because he'd been a manager in like an upcoming, a previous tag match where it made sense to have him there. But when he walked out with Ospreay, I mean, look, guys, 80,000 people, 72,000 people, 72,000, technically 72,000 people. 80,000 in our hearts, though, yeah. But 72,000 people screaming. It was loud. Like, he was over. Ospreay is like a big deal. Obviously, he's a London lad, or England lad. Sorry, I think he's from Essex.
Essex, yeah.
He's an England boy, and he's a fantastic wrestler. Paul Heyman said that years ago. Many people have said it over the years. One of the best. Absolutely deserves all the recognition in the world. And they switched the roles. They did something different with it. It felt big, but there was still stakes. Jericho was an antagonist. They did stuff afterwards with him and Sammy Guevara. Like there was storyline there. Even during the match, there was storyline.
Yeah. Well, immediately, as we were saying, it's like the dream match. Jericho and Ospreay they've always been destined to fight. You know what I mean? It was meant to happen before COVID. It was like 2019 or something like that. It was meant to happen.
Oh,
But it never
yeah,
did.
that's true.
But then suddenly Will Ospreay cut this promo and started talking about his stepson that he's taking care of. I'm working in Indy the night before. I'm trying to feed my family and stuff like that. And you're in my way. He said, this line was fucking beautiful when he said it. But he said something along the lines of, I respect you and everything you've done, but I'm going to use that as rocket fuel for my future. And then he signed the contract. So I went, oh my God, what a brilliant thing to say to build to him. I'm using you in order to get a bunch of money and make sure that I'm a top star.
You know, I think part of the reason as well why they decided to do the old switcheroo as well, because I think Jericho's still a bad guy now. I don't know. I think they're sticking with it. Somewhere in the middle. It's a tweener.
Tweener with Sammy Guevara. Sammy Guevara's feuding with him at the moment, so I think he's...
That promo you're talking about the week before, I heard that. I remember hearing people cheer for Ospreay. America loves Ospreay too. Yeah. Americans love him. And they also love the fact that we have that like dynamic. Like they love UK fans because they know we're passionate, and they also love how you can be cheered in one country and booed in another, because it is fun.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
Same with Saraya, you know, huge in England. Yeah. She's hated in AEW. She's playing the heel. I think there's something to it, but you can't deny people. I mean, it's like MJF is loved. He was super mega over. Like, oh my God, when I tell you, like, these people were into him, like, he was so over. Like, it's impossible for him to be a bad guy right now. Like, he could do it. They could do the switcheroo, but the irony is, the better they are at being a bad guy, the more you love them.
Yeah.
Because it's
The better, and we'll dive into this really quickly, but the better rivalry here is definitely Adam Cole turning on MJF. Cole becoming the heel.
Yeah.
Keep MJF. That to me, MJ. It's always been planted there that MJF is going to eventually turn on Cole.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think it's more interesting to do that.
Way more, especially with the whole Roderick Strong thing they've got going on, which, by the way, the best character work Roderick Strong's ever done in his entire career.
You know, another thing they could do as well, which I think would be interesting, if you want to bring back factions for a bit and do some of that warfare, this is a way to bring back the Pinnacle in a logical way and have them as faces against a heel Undisputed Era.
Bring back Kyle O'Reilly when he's back from his injury.
Yeah. And also Bobby Fish as well. 4v4.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're not keen on the idea, huh?
Well, I like, listen, Bobby Fish.
He gets a bad rap.
Bobby Fish, the wrestler, great guy, great. I love his in-ring work. Deciding to jump ship and try and get Adam Cole, Kyle O'Reilly, and Roderick Strong all back on NXT and begging Triple H for a job back. It was certainly a decision he made. But
did that actually happen?
That's supposedly, apparently he left AEW and tried to get Adam Cole and Kyle O'Reilly to hop back over to NXT. Apparently, that's the.
I don't believe that.
I don't know. That's just what I've seen.
I hate it though, because whenever I hear and think of Bobby Fish, even though he's brilliant, I can't help but not think of that Impact thing where he's like, where's the lie? There's just silence. And I think it was just unfortunate in that specific moment, because sometimes that happens, that you just don't, like, fans are not into something. Yeah,
promos just don't work. It doesn't connect.
Yeah, but it was just like, oh, and like Twitter just memed the hell out of it. It was just pain. I felt for the guy. But yeah, there's money in that. I think MJF is better as a heel, but I think it's worth testing the waters with him as a face, because look, he's still saying bad guy things, and he's kind of like playing like an Austin kind of good guy, where he's still the same guy, and it makes sense. Like, why would he change? He's still MJF. He's still arrogant and stuff, but you love him for it, and he plays to it, you know. And that makes sense to me. Yeah, don't change him, but maybe allow him to like somewhat celebrate the fact that
Yeah.
everyone loves him.
But he said in a promo, like this might have been a couple of weeks ago at this point now that he started saying it. But he said, "I'm still a scumbag, but I'm your scumbag," and I fucking love it. It's the perfect, like you said, it's the perfect representation of Austin as a character. It's
I like it.
still being the
Yeah,
same
it's like
person
you love me.
whilst
I'm an asshole, and you love me for it. And it's
yeah,
like, yeah, we do. And it's like, okay,
yeah,
cool, that works. Yeah, but he'll be a bad guy again down the line. But they should do it at
100%.
a time where it makes sense. And I totally agree with you. I think Cole turning on him is brilliant. Cole is a good heel anyway.
Great heel.
He can do anything. That guy. It's natural, yeah, and it'd be interesting to see where they go with this. To be honest, because I felt like they would just do the turn there. They chose not to.
Yeah,
So, but obviously the story is still developing. I think it's going to lead to an eventual turn. I think
yeah,
it'll be everyone coming together, and then and because you can still do the Pinnacle, FTR's still there, Wardlow's still there.
yeah.
I think it would be good for everyone involved
Yeah.
as long as it leads to something.
Please.
Please. There's something there, man, for sure. We've spoken quite a lot about the two big companies, so I just want to kind of like break them down a little bit as far as the future is concerned.
Mhm.
So since we've been talking about AEW, let's talk about them first. What do you think the future of wrestling will look like for AEW?
Well, from what I've heard news-wise, supposedly people have been saying that AEW were going to go on to is it still called HBO Max, or they've changed it to Max now, I
Really?
think?
Oh yeah, they dropped the name, didn't they? It's
yeah,
just
they
called
dropped
Max
HBO.
now.
Yeah, it's fuck knows why.
Stupid.
But yeah, supposedly because they had the what was that show called? Was it All Access? Was that the AEW show that the backstage behind the scenes show they did? But anyway,
Something like that.
they had a behind the scenes show that I think went on to Max, and people have been saying that they're going to potentially put the show on Max and then also run more pay-per-views throughout the year. So I assume using like your Blood and Guts that's usually for Dynamite, you just make that a pay-per-view and shit like that. So ultimately, I think it's even with all the drama and all the shit going down in AEW, I think they're still doing great things over there. It's clearly shit's working. It's
That's what I don't get though. Like, you're right. Business wise, they're still making big moves. But like, as an investor looking into this, I mean, I don't know. I can see money in it here and there, but more in the infrastructure, less in the actual content.
yeah.
I feel like the content largely is quite underwhelming. Like
Yeah,
overall,
I can
look
see
at
yeah.
from a business
Yeah.
perspective, right? If you're HBO Max, there's definitely money in having a wrestling show on your streaming service, 100%. But AEW, I don't know. I mean, if we're talking Dynamite only and pay-per-views, or no, fuck it. If it was pay-per-views only, I'd say like maybe you got something there, because AEW does tend to step it up when it comes to pay-per-views.
Pay-per-views, I don't think there's ever been a pay-per-views I've watched of AEW's where I've felt disappointed.
Not even
all.
All
Like,
Out. I felt like All Out was a bit underwhelming.
I really enjoyed All Out, actually. I don't think it definitely wasn't my favorite pay-per-view of all time, but it's definitely a decent pay-per-view. I enjoyed it.
I just felt like after All In was such a big scale one, this one felt like a B tier pay-per-view.
It was definitely a bad placement for the next a whole week after like the 72,000 attendance pay-per-view. It felt weird to just then throw in a pay-per-view. There were some good moments in there though. I really like the Miro Hobbs stuff that he did there with his wife coming back and shit like that. I thought that was really interesting. I actually quite enjoyed the MJF Cole and Dark Order. I know Dark Order get a bad rep these days about them even being on TV, but I thought that match was pretty solid. I really enjoyed that.
So it's suffice it to say you think that like AEW is going to stick around, like stay in business.
There's clearly like you said, the content it can be a bit off at times, but I think there's hidden numbers somewhere. Because clearly they're doing something right. Like there's a certain, whether it's because Tony Khan's mentioned before that the viewership in the UK is I think he said something like 3 times bigger than.
I don't trust him on numbers anymore.
Yeah. Do you know what? You're probably right. Let's scrap that. But no, but
Liar.
there's definitely a number there that's clearly staying. Yeah.
I will add though, WWE inflated numbers and still does to this day.
Yeah.
It's just, I think the problem is we knew that WWE did it.
Yeah.
Right. And it's kind of like a running joke at this point. But with AEW, Khan has always been like quite like heavy on being accurate with facts and statistics. Like that was a big thing with AEW from the presentation standpoint. He wanted it to be very sports like. So for instance, if you watch AEW, you see when wrestlers come to the ring, it will often state like their win-loss record over the course of the year or entire AEW career, something like that. He's always been big on that. He's obviously involved in Fulham Football Club and the Jacksonville Jaguars. He's big on numbers, this guy, right? And it was always about accuracy.
Yeah.
So to then report an inaccurate number on Twitter, Twitter, but like that's mainly where he puts stuff out, and he's very opinionated. I'm surprised some of the stuff he responds to, traps back at. Like sometimes I feel like his PR team should be like, listen, Tony,
you don't need to
stop quipping back at like people on Twitter who've got like 10 followers and are just trying to wind you up. Like you don't owe these people anything. It's noble. It's cool to speak to the fans, and I get that he's a fan, but he's now also a business owner. Here's the thing: you're not a fan anymore. You can always be a wrestling fan. Don't get me wrong, but you are in the business now. You're going into your 5th year of business in the wrestling industry. You own the company that's considered largely number 2 in the world for wrestling, and you've done some big stuff. Now's the time to get more serious, I think.
Yeah.
I
agree. Yeah.
I don't know, man. I mean, I agree with you. I think they will continue, but I think hard times are ahead. I mean, firing Punk is like a big part of that, and it'll be interesting to see how they move forward. I don't think ultimately it's going to lead to them losing, but I do think that they're going to, and the numbers don't lie. Right now, they're suffering, and they spell disaster for them at Sacrifice. No, I'm just kidding. There's a lot of stuff they need to iron out, but they've got some big stars there, but they need to keep hold of them.
Yeah.
MJF, the dude is a star. He'd be so good in WWE. Like he'd be instantly top of the roster.
100%.
Now, we don't know what's in his mind. We don't know what's in the mind of other guys in AEW, but I feel like a lot of them, especially ex-WWE guys, I think a lot of them just see it as like, this is a payday until maybe one day I go back. Like I reckon Miro probably feels that way. I have a feeling.
Like you said, we can't ever know what the people are actually thinking.
No.
I think Andrade is definitely one of those guys that.
What happened there? I don't get it.
I genuinely don't know.
Is he still in the company or has he left?
He's still in the company, I'm pretty sure.
See, this is what blows my mind. You've got people like that on the roster, but you just never see them. Like, what are they doing? Like, is he just letting the contracts like
I don't know
play out so they can't wrestle anywhere else? I don't get it.
I don't know. Well, so he literally he was in that. So when Collision was starting back up again, you had the Miro, Thunder Rosa, and Andrade things.
Thunder Rosa, man, I miss her so much.
Apparently, she's coming back soon. Apparently, she's fully healed from her injury, at least almost 100%. But yeah, they brought Andrade back for Collision, gave him a feud against the House of Black for about a month.
I remember that.
He's just not done anything else. At least
I feel that was a case of bad presentation. They let him talk. He's not a great talker. He doesn't need to be. He's an excellent wrestler. Yeah, give him a mouthpiece. He was brilliant with Zelina Vega in WWE.
Yeah.
Oh, man, I wish they could get her in.
Why we?
It makes no sense, man.
I know.
It makes no sense.
I know.
What can you do, eh? Future of WWE. I'll add to this as well before you answer. We mentioned earlier that we get into this, so I think maybe consider this as part of the answer. So they've just signed. WWE and too much AEW. WWE and UFC have now merged under a company called TKO.
Yes.
That's the now.
Yeah.
What do you think is the future of WWE with that in mind?
I mean, what else can I say other than there's no way that anything could go wrong with it. They've been going for how
That's a
long
big
now?
statement.
It's a big statement, but it's
nothing could go wrong, huh?
It's the WWE. I think. I mean, ultimately, at this now, I'm pretty sure they're doing a bunch of layoffs at the company with behind the scenes people. They're doing a merger of both the UFC and WWE backstage personnel, which is a shame.
Yeah.
But I think in terms of business and in the wrestling industry, I think it's the, like you said, it's the biggest company in the world. It's the WWE. Like there's no, I in my mind, I don't know how you could fumble a bag that big.
I agree. I feel like the way I look at WWE, and I don't know, maybe other people will see it differently. I look at WWE as existing on its own planet outside of wrestling.
Yeah.
Like it is wrestling, but it's like it does its own thing, and nothing is close to it. Like if you compare like AEW and New Japan, or CMML and MLW or whatever, you can find similarities. So like if it's AEW and New Japan, I think their love for violence and blood is big, for example, in the presentation. Less so in WWE. WWE has this kind of like style, which some people feel it's watered down. I understand that. I get that. Sometimes they step it up, sometimes not. There's always surprises. I give them that. But it does kind of feel like, yeah, this is the sports entertainment company.
Yeah.
Everywhere else is for the wrestling.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's that in mind. But then there's also the infrastructure. Like you can't deny it. They have the best production. They have the best infrastructure. I mean, WrestleMania, it's the spectacle, isn't it? It's the Super Bowl of wrestling.
Like you said, so many, like, you can skip like 9 months of the year with WWE. But as soon as Royal Rumble starts and as soon as WrestleMania is there, suddenly it's business picks. I wouldn't be surprised if business picks up for them. Like I said, more people are going to be tuning in. Oh, it's Rumble season, it's WrestleMania season.
What do you think about crossover between UFC and WWE? Do you think there's going to be like a lot of crossover there? You know, because obviously they are different. They're not going to be able to. I don't know that how many opportunities they'll have to do crossover because it is different fan bases. One is entertainment and one is real based sports. But I don't know. What do you make of that?
Well, I think fan bases is the immediate thing, like you said, completely different. Like you said, one's entertainment, one's about real combat sports. But I think even just the way that UFC fans think about pro wrestling in general, like I know there's definitely some crossover there in the fan bases, but they don't give a shit about wrestling. They don't care. Like, no, I want to watch some actual people fight each other. Why would I watch this fake shit? So I think my only issue would be is that you could potentially do crossover with some people, but I don't know how that'd go over with each of the fan bases. I don't know because if you try and bring over some UFC guys to the WWE to do some promos or do some matches, it's one of those things where it's like I don't know what the purpose of it is. I don't know.
I agree. I think that's the worst thing they could do, because I feel like it exposes wrestling more, which don't get me wrong, everyone knows, but like I feel it undermines what you're trying to achieve in WWE, because the whole thing is like believability, isn't it?
Yeah.
And like, I remember people saying the same thing when Lesnar came back, and they're like, how can we be expected to believe anyone can beat him when he's legitimately UFC heavyweight champion?
Yeah.
And it's a fair point. It is.
Valid argument.
And, he's put over guys over the years, and they did a really good job. But I mean, if Rollins and Lesnar were in a legit match, Lesnar would eat him.
Pretty much.
No disrespect to Rollins, but he'd probably say the same. I agree with you. I think I heard someone, I think it was that sent in like comments to Eric Bischoff's show, Strictly Business. They said there might be some opportunities for crossover with the video games. think
Oh, that's a good
that's
point.
a shout. Maybe with UFC 5, or maybe you could have unlockable wrestlers in the TK series from UFC. But again, I mean, that's fantasy. That's great. That
Yeah,
works.
yeah.
I think you could maybe introduce like UFC rules, MMA rules, matches, stuff like that. You've got people on the roster in WWE that are MMA fighters.
Mm.
Lashley, Bobby Lashley, Matt Riddle. There's a few other guys that are involved, but
Yeah.
like those are two that come to mind. Obviously, Ronda Rousey, if she's still there. I don't know if she's still there.
I think she's left, actually. I don't know.
Has she just left?
Shayna. I think so,
Shayna
yeah.
Baszler,
Shayna
yeah.
Baszler, yeah.
So you got people that like could do something if they wanted,
Yeah.
but then that's the thing. If they're in WWE and then they do stuff in UFC or vice versa, it's a bit.
Yeah,
I don't know. I feel like it's one or the other, isn't it?
especially if I don't know if people even want to be risking going to the Euro. You know, like Shayna Baszler clearly is enjoying wrestling. She loves wrestling. I don't know personally if you want to be
It's
risking
different.
actually getting hit and potentially breaking something. Suddenly you're not rested all for a long period of time. I don't know. It's a weird.
I feel like another aspect to it as well is the fact that not only is it more of a risk, but the preparation is different.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, all right, granted, when Punk did it, like I always bring up Punk.
Here we go again.
Such a mark. You have to train for a long time to do it.
Yeah.
I think he trained for like the better part of a year and a half, and granted he's older, but like, you know, it's not something you could just do.
Yeah.
You know, like if Shayna Baszler was like, all right, I'm going to do some MMA now, she'd have to like take 6 months to 8 months off, build up for a fight or something. I don't know. She wouldn't be able to wrestle, that's for sure.
No, of course not. No.
It's
Again,
just...
that's the risk that's involved in it too. You don't want to end up hurting yourself in the ring, and suddenly you can't do the thing that you want to do.
Do you think ultimately this merger with UFC will be good for WWE?
Now, I'm not a businessman,
Sure.
but I there's got to be something there that's like you don't sign the dotted line unless there's a reason to sign that dotted line.
Money. That's why.
Yeah, exactly.
That's why they did it. 9 billion, I think Vince walked away with.
Like that, yeah.
Jesus.
Fucking hell. Yeah, I guess it just depends on what they do with the merger. How do they maybe not take advantage, but what do they choose to do when they? I don't know. Maybe it will be good for business for the WWE. But again, it's been a company for so fucking long now that, like I said before, I think it's a big bag to fumble if you.
Fair enough, man. I get you. Thanks for that. Right, bunch of random wrestling questions for you. Totally unrelated, just random. In your opinion, why should people watch wrestling?
So many different ways to get into wrestling. Not even in just wrestling styles, but also kind of, you know, how like storytelling and promos and stuff. There's so many different avenues into why people become wrestling fans. And I think, like, again, there's so many different companies, so many different tastes, so many different things that people want to watch, that it's just, again, it's like going to the theater. Like, there's so much shit that you can enjoy about pro wrestling, that why not just give it a chance? You know what I mean? I remember I went to an episode of SmackDown in 2017. They were doing a show in the UK, in Manchester. It was the episode where AJ Styles beat Jinder Mahal for the WWE title. The first time
you saw that.
The first time the WWE title changed hands on UK soil. I saw
Mad. Oh, that must have been huge, man.
It was great. And it stopped Brock Lesnar versus Jinder Mahal happening at Survivor Series. So, but yeah, we watched that. It was me and my brother who were the wrestling fans, and then my mum took us to go watch it. And like, you know, my mum's just on her phone the whole time, taking pictures of us whilst we're enjoying the show. And then, like we mentioned before, 205 Live pops up afterwards.
Oh, yeah.
And suddenly, the fucking Kalisto's jumping around, doing all these flips and stuff like that. And my mum turns to me and she goes, "Why didn't they put this on at the start? Like, this is great." I was like, "Oh, you're enjoying wrestling? What? You've been on your phone for the last 2 fucking hours. What do you mean you're enjoying?" Yeah, suddenly it was just all these acrobatics were happening, and she was suddenly invested, she was into it, and then suddenly if you just hook them in with a fucking storyline too and characters that you enjoy, all of a sudden it's a wrestling fan. That's it.
Yeah, I mean that's it. That's what I say to a lot of people. Like if you just can get past the fact that it's choreographed, there is a lot of entertainment value in it for sure, and
100%.
on many levels. Absolutely. Yeah, I might as well just share with you as well, like my experiences. So obviously All In, but prior to that, I saw WWE SmackDown in like '05 or '06, I believe, in London. The only thing I can remember was Kurt Angle being thrown through a table by Mark Henry.
Right. Oh, right. Yeah.
Announcer's table, I think.
Oh, cool.
I've never been able to find the episode. I don't know if it happened on air or afterwards, but I remember that. So that was fun.
That's a cool little memory. That's cool.
I also saw like wrestling in like a tiny theater, right? And like, you know, I was like, oh, these guys, you know, this is interesting, I suppose. I don't know. I was young. I was a kid.
Yeah.
But then who should I see in the ring? Gangrel.
Oh shit! What
was
weird...
there? Yeah, this was like late 2000s, I think. Gangrel in the ring, and he was amazing. Still, just got it.
That's so sick.
I was like, I couldn't believe it. I was like, that's Gangrel. I grew up watching him. I played him in video games. What the hell?
The vampire guy.
I couldn't believe it.
Oh my god,
he was so good.
So sick.
Oh man, yeah. Have you seen any other shows in addition to that one?
I have not seen any wrestling shows live in that capacity. I was going to go to All In this year, but I wasn't able to get my financial situation sorted.
It's a tricky one, isn't it? Yeah.
So I was unable to go. But I'm planning on going next year or seeing if there's any other shows popping up from time to time.
There's always shows that going on, but yeah, that's another point as well. Do you think AEW All In's number 2 is going to be any good?
I think it's got to be. If it's essentially going to be at least what I think your version of WrestleMania, essentially. You know, you go into this massive stadium and shit like that. Like, I don't think.
I mean, that's interesting to me. Yeah. If they don't you think that's interesting? Okay, so WWE is like based in America, right? Mm-hmm. And they've always done WrestleMania in America. And there's been talks about bringing it to England and stuff. Who knows? But like, I feel like the most we'll probably ever get is some of the big pay-per-views. Maybe we'll get like a Royal Rumble or something, right?
Well, we got Money in the Bank this year.
Who cares, man? Come on. Like, yes, fine, but we want the big ones. Imagine Royal Rumble in London. That would be insane.
That'd be sick.
Imagine that at Wembley. Fuck me. That would be absolutely mental. There's money there. But I don't know. Like, I feel like if you're gonna do WrestleMania internationally, or you know, AEW All In internet, you need to go country by country.
That's what I'm completely in agreement.
Yeah, 1 year London, 1 year Australia, 1 year, I don't know, Japan. Like, just you know, mix it up. And I don't know. To me, it feels weird to have your version of WrestleMania, your main show, in a foreign country to your company.
Yeah. No, yeah,
like, don't get me wrong. Like, I love, obviously, as an English fan, I love to have it here. Brilliant. Like, but that to me feels weird. Like, WWE coming to London to do WrestleMania, to me, is the beginning of a new business venture. It's like, okay, we're going to do WrestleMania internationally now. Now it's an international thing. They'll still come back to the States, but like it'll vary, and it will start the beginning of the next 10, 15 years of business. That's the way I see that. And that would make sense because we've been building to that and they've been testing the waters over the years. But with AEW establishing this now and then saying, oh, we're the biggest in England, and like they're fighting for that, it's like, okay, I get it. But it just feels odd because they've not done anything like that on that scale in America. So I feel like it alienates their American fans in a way.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe I'm just finding stuff where there is nothing. I don't know. What do you say to the question, is wrestling fake? Why are you still watching it?
My mind, I don't know if you've ever seen the interview. But my mind instantly goes to what's he called? It's one of those late night talk shows, and it had Roddy Piper on it, and and his whole the host, his whole thing was, well, wrestling's fake. Wrestling's fake. And he was talking to Roddy Piper about it, and Roddy Piper immediately stands up from the chair, begins to unbuckle his belt, pulls down part of his pants, and shows his hip. And it's like this huge bruise on it there, and he goes, "Is this fake? I've had to get surgery on this hip. I've been broken bones all over that." And that was his immediate. He just immediately stood up, dropped his pants, and said, "No, wrestling isn't fake." And I think that's immediately where my mind goes anytime I hear the question of, wrestling is fake, and it's like, well, this
is the thing I don't get as well. Like, why are people so fixated on the fact that it's choreographed, or the fact that it's not like a legit sport? Like, like why? Like, when you tell people it's entertainment, they just can't get their head past it. Like, well, why would you want to watch it? And you're like, well, to me, it's no different like watching a movie.
I was just going to say, sorry to tell you guys, but Breaking Bad is fake. I'm sorry to reveal this.
Right? Do you know what I mean? Like Arnold Schwarzenegger is not really the Terminator. It's just, sorry, man. Like,
Sylvester Stallone didn't actually fight in the war and go into the jungle and
right? Yeah,
he's a Rambo.
It's not real. So you're an idiot for thinking it's real. I don't know. Like, to me, I mean, don't get me wrong. There's a lot that's weird about wrestling in the sense that, like, okay, so there's this world, it's like a reality they live in, right? If you look at it like that, right? But then that whole thing of like kayfabe doesn't really exist anymore, but some people play to it, some people don't. On Twitter, you'll follow someone and like 1 minute they're like, oh, screw you lot, I hate you all. And the next minute it's like they're posting about some charity they donated to. And it's like, I don't really get it. I don't understand. Some guys take it seriously, some people don't. That's confusing. I'll admit that's weird.
I agree with you on that one.
But when it comes to just what wrestling is, like, no, it's not fake. I mean, the fact that they have to get multiple surgeries a year and people die young in this business from injuries, from sicknesses, etc., I don't see how you could ever call it fake. I feel like predetermined is a good word, maybe.
I feel like it's a slap in the face to all the wrestlers that have spent years of their time honing this craft, trying to...
And here's another thing as well that I don't really hear enough people talk about. As a professional wrestler, you have to essentially be a method actor 24/7.
Pretty much.
Do you know what I mean? You've got to be excellent in the ring. You've got to be able to talk really well. You have to have good body language, and you have to be a convincing actor.
Yeah.
Like, that's really fucking hard to do all of that. Like, do you know what I mean? Like,
they're better be someone else other than yourself.
That's the thing. So a lot of those guys in that industry, like, I mean, people act surprised when you see like wrestlers become actors afterwards. It's like, it's not really that surprising, really.
Yeah, no.
I mean, they spent the better part 20, 30 odd years pretending to be these different people.
Yeah.
So is it really that difficult? Yeah, do you know what I mean? Like, Dave Bautista, brilliant.
That's so good.
Amazing. And they've all done it. They've all wet their, whatever you think of The Rock and John Cena, like, at the end of the day, they've made successes of themselves in the acting industry. And I can see why. They have charisma. They got it. They've got what you need. Wrestlers don't get nearly enough credit when it comes to that. And it pains me to see that, because they bust their asses and there's so much you don't see behind the closed doors, but people make fun of it. And I get it. Yeah. There's always going to be people that make fun of it. I remember when I was a kid and people found out that it wasn't real, and people would mock me for still being into it. They're like, oh, why would you still watch it? And I'm like, because it's fun, because it's good, it's interesting, it's entertaining. It never stopped being fun for me. Like, if anything, the more I learned about the business, the more interested I got. Like, when I started looking into the history of the business and how far back it goes, I mean, this is the thing. People don't know this. Wrestling comes from the carnival. And it goes back as far as like the late 1800s, early 1900s, something like that.
Something along those lines.
It used to be a traveling circus thing where you'd have a guy who'd be like world champion or self-proclaimed world champion. And maybe you have like a local guy, usually a plant, but like a local guy would come and challenge the champion. And most of the time they'd lose. Sometimes they'd win. People might make bets on who's going to win. And largely it was just a strongman thing, few slams, I'm the champion. But there was something there. They built something there. And then eventually it slowly became its own thing. People slowly started to get into the idea of, oh, this wrestling thing, this is interesting.
Yeah.
Then they started building it into something that people would pay money to see. And of course, for many years, people didn't know that wrestling was predetermined, and they used that to their advantage and did a lot of business with that. And then eventually people start to learn that it's predetermined, but like it didn't really affect the business at all. You know, like when people in the 90s like were saying like, oh my God, Vince has ruined the industry for everyone. It's like people knew that wrestling wasn't legit for many, many decades. There were news articles in like the 40s, 50s about this, trying to expose the business, you know. Jim Cornette's really good for this, like being a historian. There's a few other people that are good historians for this stuff. Interesting business, lots to say, lots to delve into. I think people need to educate themselves better to really gain a full understanding of what wrestling actually is. It's not just a few seconds of silly shit. It can be, don't get me wrong. There's plenty of stuff I can't defend and wouldn't try to. But there's a lot I will defend, because I think wrestlers bust their asses. They work hard. They deserve respect. They really give their lives to the business. Some people like Eddie Guerrero gave their life to the business, and they've created a legacy that will last forever because of what they sacrificed and gave. And like, you know, couple of final questions for you related to wrestling. Who are your current favorite wrestlers?
I knew you were going to ask me this fucking question. Okay. So are we talking about at this moment in time people that are wrestling right now? Okay, so MJF is immediately on that list.
Why?
It's just everything about him, man. He's just so, again, going back to the kayfabe conversation, he's so good at being able to maintain that character, but also being able to blur the lines of what's actually real and what's fake. Like I feel like he's the only, or at least from what I know of, the only guy that I know of that where I actually sometimes look at him and go, wait, are you being legit there? Is that actually your opinion? Like, what? I don't know. Like, I think that's what's been missing up for a long while within wrestling, is someone like him. So I'm glad that there is now MJF in this business. It's really, really cool to see.
Anyone else particularly that stands out?
I think. I mean, I've got to give a shout out to fucking Konosuke Takeshita.
Okay.
I know it's a bit of a rogue shout, but I think he
makes some waves.
His wrestling ability is just fucking unbelievable. Supposedly, during his time at I guess the university in Japan, he did a whole thesis on the physics of a German suplex, and I think from that day on, I immediately fell in love with him as a person. He did a whole a hypothesis on how a German suplex works, the physics of the whole thing. And as soon as my mate told me about that, I was like, I fucking love this guy. This guy's great.
I remember years ago someone telling me that like someone did their thesis on like wrestling terms, like a wrestling dictionary, which I thought that's genius.
That's really cool. That's really smart.
For those who don't know, obviously I mentioned that wrestling comes from the carnival, and there's all these different terms that exist within wrestling that people don't know. Like we mentioned the word work. Mark is like a classic carnival term, which used to be, I mean, still used in a negative context, but it means something different now. But basically back in the day, what it meant was when you had someone that you had considered you put a mark on, that meant that's someone that you're going to try and like screw over, basically. Like they're a mark. We're going to pull them in with this dodgy card game that we got, or dodgy duck, the carnival games that we know are a fix, right? That was where that term originated for. Now in modern wrestling, mark means like someone who I guess takes the business too seriously, or is like too.
It's like someone that thinks they know more about the business than
Well, I don't
Like,
know. I mean, well, that's a smart mark. That's someone,
yeah, you're right. Yeah, you
but
are.
but it's like being overly enthusiastic about things to the point of like oh, it's too far.
Yeah,
But I agree with you. I think that it's very easy for us two fans to sit here and know about the business. Everyone knows about the business, but now there's like this hierarchy within. Like I agree with the wrestlers. I think it's dumb as fuck. Like
yeah,
tribalism, seeing people attack each other, attack wrestlers, attack each other for what they like, and like, oh, I know more than you. I know this. I know that. Like, who gives a fuck?
yeah.
Like,
Why are we bothering about whether this company's better than this company? Like,
none
it's
of it
so dumb.
matters.
Yeah,
Yeah, and like people clamoring over like the knowledge they have from behind the scenes stuff, even though
yeah,
they get fed bullshit.
yeah,
At the end of the day, unless you were there in the room, you don't know.
yeah,
Like everything I mentioned earlier about the CM Punk stuff and everything in AEW, you heard me use the words allegedly, and I think this is the case. I don't know. This is my impression because I don't know. I don't
yeah,
know these people in real life. I don't know what happened, and none of us do. It's just, and we know that there are people. We call them in the wrestling industry the stooges, people that like give over information to the press, who then report on said information. But like we know that these people feed them false information to
yeah,
create false narratives or to put out the stories that they want to put out or support the people they want to support or whatever. Like this stuff is put out there on a reason, for a reason, guys. But like I don't know. I mean, again, like, I agree. Like I don't understand people's obsessions with like ratings and stuff.
yeah.
Like
That's
why?
really dumb. That is
Like for
really
me,
dumb.
it's like okay, is the show good or not?
Yeah,
Is it fun to watch or not?
yeah.
Like who cares if like oh last week there was 150,000, now there's 125.
Oh no.
Shows in the bin. It's like no, it's when people stop watching for good, then it's in the bin.
Yeah,
If people like look, I might not be a fan of everything that's going on in AEW or WWE, but the fact of the matter is loads of people watch it and
yeah.
continue to watch it, and that's what matters. Are
Yeah,
people interested?
it's really funny when people try and and they start comparing the two. It's like, oh well, WWE did 2 million on SmackDown and AEW only did, and it's like, but like we understand that those are the levels. Like we're not out here trying to pretend that AEW should be doing better numbers or WWE should be doing like. There's no, I don't know. Like it's such a weird, especially
Very
as a
strange.
fan. Like I don't care for that.
It's just I don't understand like where that came, like how that became what modern being a modern fan is. I mean,
Yeah,
it's not for me. I can hear it's not for you, and I think for
no,
many guys, it's just like you just enjoy what you enjoy, right? Like wrestling is either good or bad, or it's always. Do you know what? I'll say this: you go back and watch like Ruthless Aggression, Attitude Era, whatever, and whatever WCW, WWE. There was always bad stuff on the shows.
yeah,
There was always stuff that was questionable or but do you know what, like even of the stuff that people said was the shits, there were people that loved it as well.
yeah.
People that kept tuning in. There were people that were still watching WCW in the dying days. So
I mean, you watch what you want to watch, but
right, yeah, exactly, exactly. Final wrestling question for you: who are your favorite wrestlers of all time?
Randy Orton, Chris
Yeah,
Jericho. I've got to come up with a Batista. I think of my three.
solid.
It's a solid. I think Randy. I think I always fluctuate. It always depends on the day. I always fluctuate between who I personally think my favorite is. But I think Randy Orton is always the constant one.
Actually, one question I forgot to ask you earlier was how you actually got into wrestling, because I think it's interesting, like how people get in to and discover it.
So, like I said before, I've always been interested in the wrestling ability
But how did
of
you
pro
discover
wrestlers.
it? How did you discover it?
So how old would I have been? I think I might have been about, I gotta say, like 8 or 9, maybe.
It's
Uh,
always young, isn't it?
yeah, I know it's always childhood. Um, and I don't know how I ended up actually getting the DVD, but I had a DVD from an episode of SmackDown in 2003, and I believe the specific DVD was specifically for one match, or maybe even just like a bunch of matches, but I must have just put one match on repeat all the fucking time. and it was Brock Lesnar versus Kurt Angle in an Iron Man match.
Ooh, that's a classic right there.
Episode 2003. That was the first wrestling match I ever
Wow.
saw in my entire life, and I just fucking fell in love with it.
What a great match to start on as well.
What a wild match!
Classic amateur wrestlers going at it.
Literally, the amount of times I've heard people tell me like, "Oh yeah, my favorite match is Brock Lesnar versus Kurt Angle," and I go, "That's the first match I ever saw." It's such a weird. I don't know. Like I said, I don't know how I got the DVD. I don't know how I actually ended up physically watching it, but I watched it and I just instantly found, started grabbing a teddy bear, doing German suplexes. I was trying to learn how to do shit and stuff like that. I was always a kid that whenever I fell in love with something, I watched it on repeat. And I could very vividly remember finishing the match and then immediately rewinding it again just to see the whole fucking thing again.
I was the same, but very different. I'll show my age here. I discovered it in the late 90s, early 2000s. I had a childhood best friend who introduced me to wrestling. And there were a few videotapes that I learned off him. One was like a raw, like 90s raw compilation video or something.
Oh, very cool.
And it introduced things like DX, Austin McMahon, stuff like that. But the one that I remember that I think made me fall in love with wrestling was WrestleMania 18, the VHS tape with the classic Rock versus Hogan match. And I remember just watching that back and seeing just the spectacle of it. Yeah. It kind of swept me up in that. And then I just kind of, a combination of that and the video games were a huge component in that as well. Which I think many people got into wrestling through the video games. They were excellent. There was that whole era from the first SmackDown game right through to SmackDown versus Raw 2011, all those different games throughout the years, just truly exceptional.
Every single one of them.
Yeah, it's good stuff, man. But yeah, that was wrestling, man. We spoke for 2.5 hours about that.
For so long.
There you go. A couple of final questions for you, completely unrelated to everything we've spoken about today.
Oh,
I ask all my guests this, so I'll be interested to see what you have to say.
Hey up.
What's been the biggest mistake you've made so far that you learned a valuable life lesson from?
First thing that came into my head, and it immediately links to wrestling. My biggest mistake is giving up on a dream that I want to do. I with COVID happening and stuff like that, it kind of stopped what I wanted to get into with games design. That suddenly that door was shut, and then a few months went by. I decided to take a year off before I went back to uni, and then my first ever girlfriend actually broke up with me, and suddenly there was this whole. I suddenly spiraled. And then, literally, for the last 2 years, I've been unemployed, and I've realised that my biggest mistake was giving up. Was just saying, you know what, I don't care. I'm just going to stay in bed. I'm going to play video games all day. I don't care. And now, all of a sudden, I'm going back to uni. I've got a part-time job. I'm doing work experience for a games design company right now. I'm also looking for other part-time work where I can get it. I've literally just done my first acting gig this year. On that thing on Choc Chips that we worked on, it's. I think for a while I forgot what it meant to actually go out and do something and be needed somewhere. So now that suddenly that's back in my life, I should have never have let myself give up like that. But that's what I've learned. I should never suddenly stop and just think, oh well, fuck it doesn't matter anymore. I'll
It's a good sentiment for us all. Yeah, no, well done, man. Proud of you. Well done.
Thank you, man. Thank you.
What's the best advice you've ever received?
Ooh, best advice ever received. I'm trying to go deep here. I don't think I've ever thought about advice that I've been given or anything along these lines. it's so stupid. The only advice that is coming to my head, and I know you're probably wanting a very deep
No,
answer.
whatever resonates for you, man. That's the main thing.
The best advice I've ever received. When I was younger, I used to play. I used to play football a lot. I used to play Sunday league.
Yeah.
Because obviously I'm a very tall guy, I'd always play goalkeeper. And I think the best advice I ever received was from my dad, telling me that any time I went for a dive to save a goal, make sure you don't land on your elbow because you might dislocate your shoulder. And that's probably the best advice.
There you go, man. For any football fans, keep that in mind. There you go.
Goalkeepers, there you go. Oh man,
solid advice.
That was the first thing that was right. I couldn't think of anything else. Fucking hell, man.
Thanks for that, man. Nice one. Final two questions for you. What's the biggest life lesson you've learned so far?
Well, I guess it goes back to the whole giving up thing. You got to make sure you keep going. You can't. I'm so. I don't want to say so far behind my mates, but my mates have got full-time jobs. They've got a bunch of money in their bank accounts now, and I'm still just trying to find my footing. And I know it's not the biggest deal in the world because I've found my footing now finally. But again, like that's just don't give up, man. Just keep fucking going, man. Keep chugging. Even if it looks dire and you go, oh, I don't want to get this job because I don't want to do that. I want to do this. I don't want to do that. I want to do this. But it's sometimes you have to do that stuff in order to get to where you need to be. And so I think that's the biggest life lesson I've learned. You just got to keep going, man.
Solid stuff, man. Final question for you. Do you have any upcoming projects or final thoughts that you'd like to share with our listeners?
No upcoming projects that I'm aware of. Like I said, I'm doing work experience at a games design company. So maybe if shit happens there, maybe I'll have something.
Best of luck with that.
Thank you. But the last thing I want to say to the viewers is pro wrestling's great, and you should watch it.
Could not agree more.
And also watch Choc Chips when that comes out. It'll come out.
Yes, at some point. Choc Chips. Listen, thank you so much, man. It's been an absolute pleasure.
It's been thank you, man. It's been an absolute pleasure. Same here, man.
You're always welcome back, my friend.
Thank you. I'll make sure when I'm working on a game or something like that, or if anything's going on, I'll let you know. We can talk more about wrestling instead.
Let's do it, man. Massive thank you to everybody listening today. Thank you so much for watching, for listening. Make sure that you check out the Discord and the Patreon links to get extra bonus content and support the show. All the links will be in the description. You can obviously check out links to and find links to what Jarod's doing as well. And just a massive thank you to everybody for watching, for listening. And as always, be safe, be well, and I'll see you in the next one.